So our webinar, Play with Your Food, Not Your Coverages. This is just an informal, hey, let's talk about your insurance. What do you need when you're owning a restaurant, what you should be looking for and stuff like that. So on the bottom, presented by Cross Insurance Agency, that's where Bob and I and Jenifer will work. I'll do introductions in a minute. And I just wanted to throw a thank you for Pittsfield, Downtown Pittsfield Inc. and Cheryl Meyer, who is hosting and did all the what do you call it? I can't even think. I should have had more coffee this morning.
Promotion.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thanks, Cheryl.
So yep. So here we go. Oh, and also I got to do both of them. Okay. So I'm Kate Lauzon. I'm in commercial lines. And a little intro and a background about me. I was actually in the restaurant industry for more than 25 years. So I know a lot about restaurants, and I've worked in front of the house, back of the house, all of that good stuff. So this is kind of like my niche here in commercial insurance, I think, is restaurants. I can relate. I know what you guys go through. I know where to look for all kinds of stuff that we're going to talk about later. Next, I have Bob, who's sitting next to me. And Bob, just do a little introduction to yourself.
I've been in the insurance since time began, 1979 to be exact. I just specialize in commercial insurance here at Cross. And obviously Cross, we do a lot of restaurants, but we're, Pittsfield's a small market town and a lot of small restaurants, and we do a boatload of them.
And we have Jenifer Powers, who's in commercial lines. She's our marketing manager. She's behind the scenes, and she'll be answering any questions throughout the webinar. Just throw them in your chat box, and she'll do the best she can to answer them as we go along. You'll also have a chance at the end of the webinar we'll open it up to ask questions to us directly. So yeah, and this presentation will be recorded for future use. So here we go. Okay. So yes, do you want your restaurant to be a well-oiled machine? A good agent will be an asset to your business by providing the best risk management strategies. So let's talk about relationships. An agent will understand the business and their needs. They will have the carriers that specialize in restaurants. And yes, we are going to ask a lot of questions that seem really personal. And in order to cover you properly, we'll need answers. We want to work with you to help lessen the risk. Why? Well, your restaurant will be safer for you and your employees and your customers. And if we can lessen the premiums, you are more marketable to the carriers. So more carriers means more trying to find the best price, right? And one thing I just wanted to throw out there is something that I learned recently. And if you have fun things in your restaurant, it's probably going to cost more. And I'm going to turn this over to Bob to explain why I said that.
Well, yeah, and back a little bit to the relationship thing. Berkshire County is a little bit of a unique market, and I think people today still buy their insurance based on a relationship. You can always find coverages on the internet, but when you have a problem or an issue, it's always you call your person. And that's all about a relationship, and that's what kind of we build our business around. So yeah, fun things cost more.
Love this one.
They do. A quick example, a couple of years ago, I went into a restaurant. Right in the middle of the restaurant, they had a pool table, and the pool table was well used, well oiled, bunch of people around. But unfortunately, insurance companies, when you have fun events like pool tables or bands that are a little on the rowdier side, insurance companies usually underwrite for that, and so fun things usually cost you more. Doesn't mean we can't get the insurance or we can't find the insurance, but sometimes people have unique things going on within their restaurant, and insurance companies rate for that. And one of them, for example, is pool tables. The other one is live music. Depends though. If you have a couple of people with a guitar, there's no issues. If you have a rock and roll band, it's an issue.
Right.
Doesn't mean we can't do it. Just makes it a little bit more difficult.
More expensive sometimes.
And more expensive.
So, all right, we'll get to the next slide here. So the 4 common types of insurance that you're always going to be looking for, AKA the short list: workers' comp, general liability, liquor liability, and commercial auto. So we'll get into each one of these a little bit more in more detail as we go on. but just know that these are the 4 things that you're usually going to be looking for when you have a restaurant. Go. And workers' comp. I mean, and the reason why I put this slide up and I got to laugh is because, workman's comp can be a sore spot for business owners. We try to make this less painful by helping you with your audits, and especially during COVID times, because there is a period that you probably shut down, and you can get a rebate on your workers' comp. And if your insurance agent hasn't talked to you about that, you should be talking to them about that. We can help with payment plans, checking to see if you're in the assigned risk pool. And again, these are things that if you don't know what they are, your agent should be telling you and talking to you about this stuff. And I'm going to pass this over to Bob because he's going to talk about limits, which is what I put up here, medical and indemnity, and the rate and officer exclusion.
Well, workers' comp can always be a sore spot for people, but we, like Kate says, we do try to work people through it, and it doesn't have to be a sore spot. And we, especially during COVID, we've spent a lot of time working people through different workman's comp payment issues and things of that nature. Workman's comp, as I think most everybody knows, is a required coverage. If you have employees, you need workman's comp. It's the state law. Some restaurants, as Kate mentioned, are what they call assigned risk. They have their insurance with assigned risk. That essentially means you've applied and no company has wanted to take you for various reasons, but because it's mandatory with the state of Mass, you have to have it, and the Workers' Comp Bureau in Mass assigns you to a company. If there's any way we can get you out of the assigned risk pool, we do that. We actively do that for a whole bunch of reasons. Some of them selfish on our part. Most of them benefit you. You get out of the assigned risk. You can possibly get a deviation in the rate. You also get better billing terms. You don't usually get billing terms with an assigned risk carrier. And so we actively look for restaurants that are in the assigned risk and try to get them out. So there's essentially 2 parts of workers' comp. Part 1 is the workers' comp, which pays for medical expenses and lost wages for the employee. The second part is what they call employer's liability insurance. Employer's liability insurance, the minimum limits by the state are 100, 500, 100. And what that essentially means, employer's liability protects the employer when the employee sues the employer for what they perceive as negligence. About 1 in 5 businesses face employer liability lawsuits over time. For whatever reason, an employee can sue you for what they deem as an unsafe work environment. They can sue you in addition to getting benefits under workman's comp. They can sue you if, for example, your fryolator they found was dangerous and they got burnt on your fryolator, and they told you several times that the fryolator wasn't working correctly. They get burned. They can sue you. And the employer's liability, the second part of workman's comp, is what compensates, pays for your legal fees and pays for any damages that are awarded to the employee because of your negligence. There's a whole bunch of different areas that an employer can be sued under. Obviously negligence, but also, you have something malfunction in your, a piece of equipment malfunction. They can not only sue you, they can sue the equipment manufacturer, and the equipment manufacturer can actually then come back and sue you as well. So that's what employer's liability pays for. At Cross, we usually suggest you increase the minimum limits over what the state requires. In fact, our mandatory kind of limits that we push in this office are $500,000, $500,000, $500,000. And to go from the required minimum to the larger limits is super inexpensive. It's kind of a no-brainer. That's kind of what one of the areas that we push here at Cross. But yeah, so workers' comp required coverage. I'm not sure whether Kate had me slotted in to talk a little bit about rates, but I will say workers' comp for a restaurant is relatively inexpensive. I believe it's about 92 cents per 100 of your payroll. Compare it to a carpenter. Carpenter pays $6.35 per 100 of payroll. So your rate is substantially lower than somebody in the trade. So it's cheap. I often see restaurants owners that to save money on workers' comp, they'll exempt themselves. If you're a sole proprietor, you can do that. If you're, there's a variety of ways that you can exempt yourself as the owner of the business. My advice at 92 cents per hundred of payroll, personally, I think you'd be crazy to exempt yourself. I don't know where you can find medical insurance for, at work injuries, or disability insurance for at work injuries at 92 cents per hundred of payroll. You just can't find it. And so you're picking up disability, and you're picking up medical benefits for a rate that's super cheap. So that's kind of my spiel on exempting yourself, but people do. I can tell you numerous stories where people didn't, and we're glad they didn't. I mean, there's not a month that goes by that I don't have a workers' comp claim from somebody that had the ability to exempt themselves, but we convinced them not to, and they've claimed benefits. So it's kind of my spiel on workman's comp.
Yeah, it is great. It's something that we'd like to. I can't. Hang on. There we go.
Technical difficulties.
Technical
There we
difficulties.
go.
Here we go. So we're going to go to the next slide here. So most of the time, you're going to be covered under a policy called a business owner's policy, called a BOP, especially here in Berkshire County, because the restaurant industry is kind of smallish, right?
Mhm.
And there's another one called the commercial package. So it's either or. But most of the time, you'll see the business owner's policy, and what us insurance gals and guys call is a BOP. So, and the reason for a BOP is if you have one carrier, single payment, and you can consolidate coverages, you can bundle and save. So that is a good thing about the BOP, is they put them all in this one package for you. Did you want to say anything about the?
Yeah, just that, years ago, you couldn't do this, and insurance industry's gotten, smartened up on this, and made BOPs eligible for restaurants, only because it really helps you not miss something, helps your agent not miss something, and it's pretty inclusive. It covers pretty much everything you need along the lines of property and general liability, and a boatload of other things.
Right. And of course, this is, the one of the sorry, technical difficulties with my mouth because I haven't had coffee this morning. So general liability is basically, it covers someone other than the employee is injured in food contamination. We have commercial property, that is protection for the building, and it helps having preventative maintenance and fire safety programs. And business interruption. So business interruption covers loss of income, operating expenses, moving to a temporary location, payroll, taxes, and loan payments, and even breaks in supply chains. Any of this stuff could happen if, like, say there was a fire and your entire restaurant burnt down. I mean, that's really the obvious, example, but there's other ways that you could get some of this insurance as well. We have employee dishonesty. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory.
Nope.
Employees stealing out of the register.
Nobody ever takes money out of the register.
Right. Exactly. We have EPLI, Employment Practices Liability Insurance, and that is covers lawsuits for wrongful discipline, discrimination, sexual harassment, violations for the Family Medical Leave Act. And we also have equipment breakdown and food spoilage. I mean, that's pretty explanatory.
Explanatory.
Thank you. My goodness, I'm having a hard time this morning. And food spoilage. If a refrigeration system breaks down and you lose, $8,000 worth of food, you're covered. Liquor liability. Now that's some restaurants have a liquor license, some don't. And we understand that. So you don't always need that liquor liability, but it is available.
Yeah.
And then our auto. So the auto is a little bit different too, because we have commercial auto is if you have like a fleet of cars you're delivering, right? Or whatever.
Autos you own.
Right, the autos you own. And then the other one is a non-owned and hired. So, and as far as I know, the non-owned and hired is something that is usually on a policy. You can add it to if it's not, and it covers that employee if you send them to the store to pick up some milk because you ran out.
Yeah, not owned and hired, super inexpensive. Depends whether you're actually actively in the delivery business or you're not. Some, obviously some places don't deliver, but again, anytime you ask your employee to use their vehicle on your behalf, You run out of ketchup and you spin down the big Y, and on the way down the big Y, your employee has an accident. They're on an errand for you, then you're gonna, and it's serious injury, you're gonna be named in the lawsuit, not owned and hired, very inexpensive. It'd be a shocker to me as a business owner if you didn't have not owned and
Right.
hired.
A lot of people don't know to ask for that.
Yeah.
So
Well, one thing I'd say about a couple of the bullet points that Kate has on here, there's still potential for, your agent or agents to forget the business interruption part. I often see where, most restaurants, a lot of them will lease their building, but there's also a lot of restaurants that own their building, but they own their building or their location under a separate entity. I'd own the building and then I'd be operating as a DBA or something of that nature. And if I'm collecting rent from the business, then there's a business interruption exposure there, because if something happens to the business, I need to still collect my rent. And then if something happens to the business still needs to have funds to pay their ongoing bills, like the bank financing or necessary payroll, stuff like that. So there's really two parts. One of the errors we find a lot when we look at restaurant insurance is we often find the named insured not including the owner of the building. So you'll own your building as an LLC and you own the business some other different way, and you just better make sure that your insurances take into effect who actually owns the building and operates the business. Because if you don't have your LLC named in some way, shape, or form, then you don't have coverage. So we see that a lot. And then on the employment practices liability, I think especially during time of COVID and beyond, you're going to see more and more. We already are seeing more and more employment practices lawsuits, wrongful termination, harassment, anything like that. It seems to be an explosion in the EPLI area. So if you don't have some form of EPLI, it's not all that expensive, but you should at least consider it. So.
Great. Thanks, Bob. Here. And this is the long list. We gave you the short list earlier, but this is the long list. And these are other things that should be included on your policy, something that you need to look for. I really suggest that you guys take out your policies after the webinar and just take a quick peek and see if these things are included.
Not to interrupt, but what we actually do once a year is we have a very long list, about 3 pages long. It's a checklist, and we send it out to every one of our commercial clients on an annual basis. And the checklist says, you have this, you have this, you have this, you don't have this, this isn't applicable, or we recommend this. So we'll recommend some of these coverages if we think that you've got a need for it, and we'll recommend them year after year after year because we feel they're important. And so not many agents, it's interesting, in the metropolitan areas, you find a lot of the larger agencies will send a checklist every year. In a smaller market area like Berkshire County, I rarely see checklists that people get, and it keeps us on the ball, reminds us that we've got to review your stuff, because we always tell you we're going to review it every year. Well, we're actually forced to review it every year with our checklist. Yep. And it catches a lot of things that you wouldn't normally think about. So.
Exactly. And Bob and I are of like mind that we want to see our clients at least once a year, if not more. And this is a good way to do that.
Depends on the food. I'd go way more than once a year.
Yeah, exactly.
Like once a week.
Right. And many of my restaurants that I do insure now, I do see them on a weekly basis, or at least do a Facebook post.
I see one in particular every single week.
Yeah. But food spoilage and contamination, mechanical breakdown, employee theft, business interruption, loss of income, extra expense, ordinance and law, wrongful termination, discrimination, sexual harassment, non-owned and hired, seasonal and peak season. And the 3 things that we haven't talked about yet already are extra expense, ordinance and law, and seasonal and peak season. And I'm just going to turn that over to Bob to give you a short little synopsis on that.
Where to start? Ordinance and law. There's actually 3 parts to ordinance of law. Most policies these days, if you write them on a BOP, they include ordinance of law coverage. And essentially, ordinance of law is you have a loss at your restaurant, and if it's partial loss, and we've got to upgrade to new building codes. Ordinance or law will cover the upgrade. Because just remember, you've heard this years and years that most insurances these days, if written correctly and able to be written correctly, are replacement cost coverages. Replacement cost means like kind. And so if your building, for example, was built 30 years ago, we're going to pay to replace that building with like kind materials. And like kind materials may not meet present building codes. Maybe they've got new ADA laws, maybe they've got new sprinkler laws, maybe they've got the structure of the roof has to be different. Ordinance or law covers the upgrade costs to replace your building. So super important, especially on an older building. Berkshire County, a lot of older buildings.
Yeah,
absolutely a coverage you need to talk about, because again, we're going to pay for the 2x4, but we're not going to pay for the 2x10. The difference is on you unless you have ordinance of law. A lot of times, some of that coverage is hardwired into the form, but depending on the age of your building, it could be a way more than is hardwired into the actual form. So that's kind of the ordinance of law. Peak season, especially in the restaurant business, maybe not this past year, but you have peak seasons, holiday seasons, where you order a boatload more food, something goes wrong, you have a limited amount of coverage on your inventory, your stock. Most policies in the restaurant business, it's easily obtainable. You can get the coverage that'll generally cover you for up to 25% more than your average monthly contents limit or stock limit. So that's kind of a peak season things. What did I miss now?
Extra expense.
Extra expense. Yeah, oftentimes you have a loss, and the insurance company knows kind of what your ongoing costs are. But a lot of times, in order to get back up and running, you may have a unusual extra expense. You have to bring in a piece of equipment. You have to bring in somebody special to do something that needs to be repaired. It's not normal to your operations, but it's necessary to get your operations back up and running again. Business income usually includes extra expense. It'll pay over and above what your limits are, just to get you up and going. The longer you're out of business, the more loss of income you're going to have. So if the insurance company can spend extra money to prevent that loss from dragging on, they're going to spend the extra money and get you up and running again. So that's an extra expense part of the policy.
Right. And seasonal peak season.
Oh, well, peak season is, again, most policies in the restaurant business will have some peak season endorsement hardwired in. Not always. You got to look at it. If you have a very seasonal business where you do boatload of business in 3 months in the summer, it doesn't just have to be a restaurant. It can be any business. And you up your inventory. You're in a retail sales business where you up your inventory for the holidays, or you up your food for the holidays, and now you've got twice as much food sitting in your walk-in, and then you have a power outage, and all that stuff gets destroyed. The peak season will cover the extra stuff you've got in there. So.
Okay, so, and one thing I just really wanted to, get out there too, our relationships are really important with your agent. And why? Because we help you with risk management strategies. So all of these things that we've talked about today and more, is your ANSEL system up to date? Are those getting inspected every month? Are there sprinklers working? Your refrigeration guys, check out your refrigeration units on the monthly basis. Do you have pest control coming in? And these are all questions that our carriers are asking us. These are going to be on your applications for when you do apply for insurance. So it's good to have all of this and know that these are the things that you're going to be asked about and looking for, and it's not really us that are asking for them, they're our carriers, and you want to get the best price and the best package deal, and that's how you can help us with that.
Yeah, and we kind of know going in, I mean, Kate especially, because she spent so many years in the restaurant business, we kind of know going in and do a walk around and get a general idea what you're dealing with, and we can almost right off the bat bird dog what issues you may have, or what special circumstances you may have, on the loss of income. One thing I've heard from every restaurant that we insure this year is how bad the pandemic has affected them, and And there's a lot of people that don't quite understand why it's not a loss of income coverage, and why can't I recoup my loss of income due to COVID? Um, Hold your breath, because there's been tons of discussion on that. We actually submitted claims to most of our carriers for loss of income coverage for COVID. Knew up front that the kind of the general consensus was that most companies weren't going to pay them because there was no physical loss to property. But there's been a lot of litigation. We follow that all the time in Europe, especially in the UK. They just ruled against the insurance companies and are paying business income losses. There's a lot of discussion in the US. We follow that. We've submitted the claims to put companies on notice. Haven't received any reimbursement from them, but we don't work for the insurance company. We work for you. Our relationship's with you. And so it's not up to us to determine whether it's covered or not covered. It's really up to the carrier. But we're going to advocate for you and continue to advocate for you. And one of them is in this area of business interruption. And I think, like terrorism of 20 years ago, I think you're going to see more legislation come down the road that might help business owners recoup money from insurance companies, maybe not past losses, but going forward. I think that's something hot on the list of legislators of the insurance industry. So, and we're on your side on that thing.
If you don't know, most policies ask you if you want to include terrorism.
Yep.
And what happened was, after 9/11, so many claims got put in and denied, right? Now you have a chance to add that, and it depends on how much. It's not really a lot. I've seen like $2, $13. That's your. But if everybody puts into this pool, then there's a huge amount of money to pay out later, right?
Yeah. And my thought is that they'll probably, the insurance company actually has written language to cover pandemic type losses for business income. Hasn't been adopted by the states. Insurance is controlled by the states, so that the forms, the policies, the thoughts are out there. It's up to the legislatures to act on that. I think you're going to see stuff on that, and it'll probably be somewhere along the same lines as the terrorism.
Right.
So an extra expense.
Right. So, great information today. So I think that's about it. We kind of ran under our time, but that's okay.
That's unusual.
It is unusual. Thank you for coming. I want to again give a shout out to Downtown Pittsfield Inc., who hosted this with us, and our address right here in Pittsfield, my direct line and my email are on the bottom of this page. This was recorded, so it'll be available later on. I don't know if you want to watch it since I made so many bumbling mistakes this time, but we are going to open it up to whoever is online with us today, and you can either write in the chat box or go ahead and come off mute, and we'll try to answer some questions.
I've got a question.
You have a question?
Yeah. How come we are like so passionate about insurance?
I'm like a big nerd. That's why.
Lots of moving parts. Been forever reading.
Hi, Sandy. How are you?
Hey guys.
Hey.
Hey, great job. Thank you so much. I do kind of have a question. In the restaurants that you guys are insuring, how often do you talk about the food spoilage? I mean, every time? Is it in? I haven't written a restaurant yet, but there are several that I am approaching. So that is something that I really want to know more. So, as an agent,
I do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like a story guy, and I have over the 42 years in the business, I have lots of stories, and I, dozens of them on the food spoilage issue. And, I don't know if I, say this on a recorded line, but to some extent, I'm a self-insure what you can guy. So if you don't have a big, you've got $2,000 or $3,000 worth of food at any given time, you don't think it'll get destroyed, you have an alternative of place to put it if your main source goes down. Sometimes I'll always mention it, always on the checklist. But to some extent, self-insure what you can. That doesn't put you out of business. Insure what you can't, what will. And so that's kind of my personal philosophy. So we talk about it every year as part of the checklist, but depending on how big the exposure is, whether we add it or not, it's a choice.
I also feel that because of the area that we live in, Western Mass, and we're surrounded by 3 states, so I'm very corner of Massachusetts. Like, I really think that that's an issue too. We see a lot of storms here. So if we see a lot of storms, we're getting a lot of power outages that could cause food spoilage. I mean, there's been,
Yeah, and on the restaurants that I've had claims on, in that have even had multiple claims over a period of 5 or 6 years, it's usually the claims small enough where it doesn't really affect the rating, hasn't really been an issue on renewal. And if you can pay that, that $1,500, $2,000, $3,000 spoilage claim, it's kind of a goodwill. Hey, listen, I've paid my premiums for 10 years, and now I have this $3,000 spoilage claim. I mean, pay those things, submit those things. I never discourage people from submitting them. Submit them, pay them, and it generally, they look at your history. If you're, submitting a claim every week, there's an issue with your business. But if you're submitting one claim in 4 years, it doesn't usually affect it. So.
And the contamination part, how do you explain that to your insureds about?
the food contamination.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah, well.
It seems to be a tricksy one.
Yeah, like, do you have a specific example where, contamination that you've encountered or that you've had a client?
Well, no, I mean, so several years ago, I lived in Texas, and there's a creamery there, Bluebell, and they had to shut down for like 6 months. It seemed like nobody got any ice cream for a really long time from Bluebell because they had to
Yeah, I remember that.
And so that affected me personally, because
Yeah.
I'm a consumer. And so I always wondered about how that affected their business, because I don't know, there was something in the ice cream that it wasn't just like one flavor, it was every flavor. So they had to shut down. And so I was just wondering, how do you write something like that? How do you protect restaurants going forward? I mean, that's a manufacturing
Right,
issue.
more
But
manufacturing
in
issue. But
restaurants, I mean, do you have to wait for a company like Bluebell to say, "Hey, our food was contaminated," or is this something that gets contaminated on site that they get covered for?
Yeah, that was listeria.
Oh, right.
yeah, yeah. Well, obviously more of a manufacturing issue and a products issue with the manufacturer, but certainly, I mean, if a boatload of your restaurant clientele got sick and probably wouldn't be too hard for you to identify, what they had to eat and got contaminated, and you received the claim, certainly something I'd submit.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've ever had personally a restaurant submitted, more spoilage claims, but really, I don't know that I've ever had a contamination claim that I've handled anyway.
Okay.
But again, if you have that relationship with your insurance person, right? Those are the kind of risk management strategies, make sure everybody's health certified and all of that. It's different in whatever state you're in.
I can tell there's a number of restaurants that I go in on a regular basis that we insure that I am like shocked at the cleanliness. I mean, these places are so cleanly, so clean. Most of the guys I know are really squared away and on the ball, and they take great pride in it. And there's places I eat every week, and I eat there every week because of their operation and how clean they are. So, all our clients seem to be pretty concerned about it. But I had a recent situation with an Ansel system. The company was just all over my client about cleaning on the Ansel system, and they did everything that was required. And there was a bit of a language barrier between the company and my insured. And I mean, I'm out there with my cell phone taking pictures of his Ansel system and what he does every week with his Ansel system, and I'm sending them to the company for him. And it's not something we'll just leave the guy hanging and let him respond. We're out there in the restaurant, in the kitchen. And again, my guy was an Asian restaurant, and just it was a bit of a language barrier, and we took care of it for him.
What's the Ansel system there you were talking about? Is that like the fire suppression or?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
here in Massachusetts,
yeah.
you have to have them. It's state law.
Yeah, over your cooking surface, you have all the hoods and all the screens and all the fire suppression stuff, and you've got to clean. You've got a lot of grease. You got to clean those screens all the time. Not difficult, just have to be done. And all our guys know that, and they do it, and they have sign offs on it, and
As a cook, I know the whole routine. Every night you take the screens out, you put them
Every
through
night.
the dishwasher.
Every night.
And you wipe everything around.
Again.
But yeah, and then they have a professional come in once a month
Once
to
a
do
month.
the whole cleaning.
Yeah.
So
So,
yeah. Great stuff. So yeah, I mean, if anybody else has any questions, I know we're down to just 2 now.
Yeah, the not owned and hired, it's kind of one of those little forgotten things. And again, if you're not in delivery business, it's super simple and super inexpensive. One of my largest claims ever was a non-owned and hired claim. It was an employee for an organization actually injured a small kid, rolled over the child with their car. Yeah, it was a serious injury, and
Oh, wow.
kid survived, but obviously hurt badly, and it was the insurance company. I'm telling you, they paid that claim in a heartbeat, and it was an employee. And the employee, you don't know what your employees have for auto limits. They might have minimum. They might have bought their insurance online and have minimum limits, and then they're out, picking up, delivering the payroll to the payroll office, and they get in an accident and they injure somebody. That's going to come back at you if they're on your. If they're on the clock for you, it's going to come back.
Making a money drop at
Making a money
night.
drop.
I mean, I remember lots of times I would have to take, the whole big, zipper envelope to the bank drop at night.
People say, well, I don't own any autos. My restaurant, I have my personal auto. I don't own any business autos. Bob's Kitchen doesn't own any business autos. They still have a huge non-owned and hired exposure.
Yeah.
And it's super inexpensive.
For the most part.
For the most
For
part.
restaurants,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah, if you're doing delivery, it's more expensive,
Right.
but it's easy to get.
Yeah,
So-
I just wrote a non-owned and hired a policy for a florist a couple weeks
Yeah.
ago,
Do deliveries all the time.
all the time. And they wouldn't add it to their policy because that's what they do,
They do.
deliveries. But it wasn't really that expensive.
So
It's like
all their
$440
employees are out
clear.
delivering flowers every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
So
So, and
Oh,
all,
yeah, they definitely get that.
yeah, they don't have to report like to us the names and driver's license or anything like that. They
Yeah.
say we've got 10 people. We don't care.
Yeah.
You're covered. All of those 10 people, 5 people, 10
No
people,
reporting.
20 people. There's no reporting.
Hey, I've got a quick question. How are you guys driving folks to your webinar? Is it on? I know I found you on LinkedIn because you'd mentioned in the training. Is it just like LinkedIn?
Yeah. So Bob and I are actually in the office. We're in our own little pod during COVID because we have to come in. We can't really work from home. It's crazy.
our office is officially closed.
Right.
Of the 30 of us that are usually here, there's 6.
Yeah. So we're
So-
actually streaming from the office.
Mm.
So
And again, my children are grown. So this is my wife and I, and we don't go out much. We follow all the protocols. She's actually,
I may have asked the question. I was talking about, I guess, like more like advertising. Like how do you get restaurant owners, to come,
webinar, right.
get you, yeah.
Downtown Pittsfield Inc. is actually Cheryl can talk about Downtown Pittsfield Inc. better than I can, but they're a program in Pittsfield. So why don't you say a little something? We've hooked up with different organizations to be able to broadcast to certain classes, right? And this one was restaurants. So
yeah, so Downtown Pittsfield Inc. is the Downtown Association for Pittsfield. So our footprint is just downtown, and we support businesses, and we're a membership organization, a nonprofit membership organization.
So what she did was she promoted for us and she sent out emails to all the restaurants that are in downtown Pittsfield, but I took it a little bit further and I put it on my LinkedIn and I also put it on Facebook and I promoted myself that way as well. I think it was in the Eagle too. Yep, which is
Press release, yep. And we pushed it on social media and we have a newsletter. So it was sent out that way as well.
Okay. Yeah, I was just kind of curious, how if you guys were just relying on social media or if you had multiple. It sounds like you've got multiple,
Sure.
streams pushing folks to the webinars.
Cheryl, Aaron is in my producer class. So for you, Aaron, the best thing to do is if you have an SBA, a Small Business Association, any kind of organization that helps restaurants or whatever class you're looking at, in your area, that's where I would start to partner with them.
Or a chamber.
Or a chamber of commerce. Yeah, anything like that. Yep.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, this is, yeah, great job.
Thanks.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much, both of you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Cheryl,
Cheryl.
for doing this, okay?
Yeah, I appreciate it.